Next item, Steve, you want to walk us through this?
Yep, Steve, I'll just maybe introduce, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair. As you know, a few years back, we joined a state program of performance measurements, and that puts us in a kind of a pool where we're compared on a number of measures with a number of local governments throughout the state. We also get a little bit of money because we're involved in that. But we've taken that a much farther, and we've begun to compile a number of, as you can see in the one book that was sent to you, 40-some performance indicators, which is, some of those we were always collecting, some we weren't, but we pulled them together, 40-some of them, talk about what we do, how we do it, and workloads and that kind of thing, and just indicators of how well we're doing. And we like to talk about this as at budget time, because it's a time that we're making our plan for the coming year. And so what it does is it allows us, as we go through the budget, to talk about performance and create a discussion really about what we're funding. And it provides the board with the same opportunity and also so that you can monitor how we're doing in a number of areas. And so we only picked, I think, maybe half of them to present and talk about with you today, but you do have the book of all of them. And certainly if you have any questions or comments about any of those, you can try to answer them today or later during the budget process. And we're going to do this a little different this year. You are going to see a number of the department directors talk to you about each of these indicators, so you don't have to listen to me drone on about them. You can hear a different voice and see a different face. But yeah, Steve's gonna take it.
Steve's gonna drone on and on.
I will drone on and on. Yes. Let me see if I can share the screen with the PowerPoint. It's not doing. Okay, here we go. All right. Okay, I think you can see that. I'm hoping.
Yep, looks good.
All right. Good morning, Commissioners, Mr. Chair. My name is Steve Hammes. I'm the Assistant Administrator for the county. As Mike indicated, the departments have been putting forth more and additional performance measures over the last couple of years. Our goal is to always try to move that forward and improve upon it a little bit each year as a way to tell a more accurate and better story for the public on what activities the county is involved in and how the services the county provides impacts people's lives. As Mike indicated, we're going to have department directors introduce and discuss their own performance measures this year, so you aren't hearing either myself or Mike. Before I get into them, I just wanted to go over that one of the things we always hope for is that our departments are choosing goals that reflect the values that the county has been operating under for the past several years. Again, these goals are that we strive to be professional, approachable, responsive, collaborative, and fair and equitable. And so as we go through these goals, you'll see that most departments are having goals that are tied to one or more of these goals to, again, advance our services to the public. And so with that, I think the first one is Janelle from the County Attorney's Office, if she's on here. Is Janelle on here?
I'm here.
Okay.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yep,
All right.
very much so.
All right. The criminal division resources, as you can see from that red line, it might look like crime is actually a little bit down. No, we are simply choosing the order in which we are putting files into the criminal justice system. As soon as COVID happened, our court hearings became not only less, but became online. And we knew that new matters being filed that were not persons being held in custody under strict timelines would just sit there without a hearing getting set. So we have very intentionally not filed new felony and gross misdemeanor charges on cases that would not be set anyway. So So you're going to see that go right back up to that 1,200 felony level that we've been at now for a number of years. But we are not, again, intentionally putting that into the court system when we can't do anything. We've been working very closely with the Public Defender's Office and the Sheriff on the use of the jail space, understanding that by bringing people in and out of the jail, we're creating additional risks, and then it's our job to make sure that these people are taken care of. So again, if we can't make progress in the court system with these files, we're simply waiting until we can. And that's starting to happen now. Thank you for the resource of the felony courtroom in the basement of the administration center. It is appropriately spaced. It is extremely professionally well done. And we are very proud of the ability to now begin to move felony and misdemeanor jury trials here in Stearns County. Not every county in the state is doing that, but we are starting to do that here now. So we are actively managing this resource. We do hope to be able to keep the ability to do remote court hearings, to not transfer defendants from jail to jail and place to place around the state. Although we have had a slowdown and we do have a backlog, we do have a very intentional plan now to move the court system forward and to get back where it is that we need to be. On the juvenile division, on the next slide, you can see that I'll wait for you to move that.
Well, there we go.
On the juvenile division, likewise, child protection cases are running pretty steady right now. If anything, we have had increased action with services due to the changing legal requirements and changing timing that they have been experiencing during these times. It's going well. In fact, actually, we're probably spending even more time with Human Services now online because we're not all running back and forth to court every single day. We can actually get some big picture things done. We're looking at some different ways to handle things. And also, juvenile crime going down is, we believe, in part because the school resource officers didn't have contact with the kids the last 3 months of school. That's usually when we start seeing things that are going on. We have reports that will come to those school resource officers when they're literally physically in the same place with the kids. And with the kids not being present, we did see those numbers go down. But we'll see what that looks like now as people go back to school. Overall, in the county attorney's office, our numbers are running right about the same as they have the last 2 or 3 months. We're just being very intentional in how we handle the limited resources of the court system at this time.
Okay. Then next we go to the auditor's office. Randy?
Thank you, Steve. So the first one we have is our bond rating, and a very good bond rating at AA+. Really in our organization, there's really not a lot more we can do. The next level is AAA. Outside the metro area, it's pretty tough to get to AAA. Other factors they look at are economic factors, the region, and then overlapping debt. So the total debt in the county by all the governmental entities they also look at. And that's the area where we're a little higher than some other counties. But that's a very strong financial indicator as a AA+. That's very good. I'll go to the next one, Steve. So debt service per capita has been going down. It's now leveling off. We're doing very well on this one. We're the 14th lowest in the state currently. We have 8 outstanding debt issues, outstanding bonds. 2 of them are for watershed districts. 3 will be paid off in the next couple of years, and then 3 will remain. Now, with the capital improvement plan, we will see some additional debt be put on, and this number likely will increase. But as of right now, and even with the new debt, I think we'll still be in a strong position. We are the lowest of the MICA counties right now. Go to the next one. So this is our delinquent payment plans. Number of plans has gone up and now have reached the top and starting to decline. I think this is one of the items we're doing to try to bring delinquency down in the county, and that seems to be working. We also do monthly and quarterly payment plans, and then online payments, of course. And then doing an online payment, you can do a partial payment, so if you can't afford to pay the whole thing at once, we do them all. So the number of delinquencies has gone down. One of the factors we look at is delinquency letters. In December, we send out letters to all people that have delinquent property taxes. And 10 years ago, that was about 4,000, just over that. And now we're doing about 2,000. So that's gone to about half of what it has been. So this shows some very good activity to help bring delinquency down. And that's, of course, good for our citizens to not have the delinquency.
Just a question, Randy. How much flexibility in terms of the statutes do you have with the delinquent payments? You know, is without a doubt, sooner or later you talk to somebody that is in significant straits. What can you do, or what do you have the authority to do to deal with that?
Yeah, and we are trying to help them out best we can. And later you'll see also in our tax forfeitures that's going down too. Our goal is to help people, stay in their house, keep their property. We don't want to be taking people's property, but we do need to get taxes paid. We are a little bit in the gray area in how we handle some of this.
Yes.
The state is statutes at least have not really caught up with the modern finance methods. So we do payment plans and different things, and they're basically a partial payment that's allowed, but they would rather see a confession of judgment thing where somebody pays once a year and they have 10 years to pay off, which is not very successful that we've found. This way, where we have payment plans that we'll set up for 2 or 3 years with people, has been very successful. So we're kind of a little bit in the gray area on some of this. Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
This next one on electronic tax statements. So this is both for our property tax statements and our TNTs. We're putting this information out on all the correspondence that we send out, and also working with the assessor's office. They are putting a checkbox on their homestead applications. So we're reaching the new residents that move in or move a lot more effectively than we have before, and we're seeing this number continue to increase. And this, of course, saves us a lot of postage, and it's a lot more automated method of getting the tax statement and TNT to people. So this has been very successful. Go ahead, Steve. My last slide is on tax forfeiture. I think you guys have seen some of this. I won't spend a lot of time, but we did have the bubble in the early 2010-11 area, and we sold off that inventory for the most part. So sales continue to go down because the number of properties are going down and the number of sales are going down. Our inventory also is at the lowest it's been for a long time. What we're getting now is structures that are not desirable, that need to be cleaned up, which is probably what we should be getting. And in 2020, we'll do probably 3 cleanups. And we do have a balance in a reserve account to help pay for that. Eventually, the revenues probably won't keep up with the costs. And I know the board, especially Commissioner Lenzmeyer, has been champion in this area. So any desirable properties we're getting cleaned up and getting back on the tax. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right.
The only performance measure historically that I personally tracked was the bond rating, and the bond rating maybe is impacted, like as Randy stated, by the debt and the management of overlapping jurisdictions, and also the local economy. And all those factors are distilled down into one rating element. And if it's done properly, it's a valuable tool for us. There was a situation, not in the recent past, but in the past there was a let's call it a scheme where the bond houses created a tool where, in effect, jurisdictions were allowed to buy down their bond rating, so to speak. Actually, it's more like bond buy up, and that got out of hand. Randy, you might have a better memory on this. I don't know much more about it. I'd have to get on DuckDuckGo and take a look at it to remind myself, but you can briefly remind board members of how that went.
Yeah, so, and even currently, we do, on most issues, do get insurance on our bond issues. So
That was it.
we get AAA rating even though we're AA plus. And if they're like the law enforcement center, they're state backed also, where we get part of that AAA state rating. So yeah, we're getting the best rate we can.
Anyway,
All
I
right,
digress.
moving on, environmental services is next, and Shelley.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Nice to see you and the board members again. The performance members, the performance measure that we're going to first discuss is the compliance with Minnesota Statute 1599 requiring permits to be issued within 60 days. The reason I use this performance measure is because of the majority of the business that we do and that people know us for is so. As you can see, in 2019, we had a slight dip in our performance measure, and actually that related to 2 permits that were registrations and in the feedlot area. So we've actually resolved one, and it was right at the 60-day lines. We did include it in the number, but you'll see that our goal is not to issue permits within 60 days, but actually to issue the majority of our permits within 10 to 14 days. We don't have that specific information because our permits will range with sub and variances and conditional use permits all the way up to that 60 days. But we do try to have, as you can see, the majority of our work done in a timely manner to be in compliance with the state requirements. So we will continue to do that. We know that our permit numbers, the 2020 is an estimate, but we think that might be a little low. So we are looking for a higher number for next year. And then if you want to move forward to the next one, Steve. This is actually a measure that the entire state looks at their recycling rates. And you can see that we went down a little bit in 17 and 18, and we expect it to go down in 19. It may, again, continue to go down in 2020. And at the bottom, there are 3 factors that are listed as to why the compliant or the rate would be decreasing. And first, that it's self-reporting for these 8 entities. And so therefore, we can't mandate it. They don't always report. MSW, which is municipal solid waste, and recycling data has been reported to the state as of 2016. So rather than coming through us as a county, they report directly to the state, which decreases the amount of reporting. That doesn't help us. And then the third has been a decline in the recycling markets. So as we have seen and promoted more recycling, the actual recycling markets have dried up. And China not taking as many products has also been a factor. What we're going to see, though, in our 2019 estimate, and probably in 20, is we also had a loss of a major manufacturer that contributed highly to our recycling rate, which is Frigidaire. They did a lot of recycling at that particular location, and that counted towards Stearns County's recycling rate. So we're not quite sure what the 2020 or what the 2019 estimate will be, but we do expect that we'll go down, and hopefully we'll stay pretty close to that 35%, which is what's expected for us as the state level. We are really looking for a plastic recycling to go up as well as our work with Tri-County and some of our organics. So we will see some changes. Hopefully, there'll be small numbers, but they'll be significant in the type of materials that we're recycling. And I think organics has a lot of potential, and we hope that that will shore up that recycling rate for us as a whole. And that's all I have for you today.
Okay. All right, moving on, we have highway. Jody, let's talk about snow, since it's 80 degrees outside.
Thank you. Sorry, good morning. The performance measure we're talking about for highway department is the snow and ice removal times on the county highway system. And keep in mind that our targets or deliverables that we set up are based on more of a worst case event, more than just your 4-hour snowfall, but one where you get a significant amount of snow over a longer amount of time and then the temperatures drop. So that's why you might think that some of these don't seem like very lofty goals, but it's more related to when we have those wind conditions or the temperatures that are dropping. We continue on average to have our plow routes take about 4.5 to 5 hours. Obviously, that's a balancing act between how much money we spend on it, how long those routes are, how many people we have working on it. Generally, we meet these thresholds, except for those times when we pull the crews so they can get some rest and we have wind, and then those wheel paths are covered back up. One thing we did try during the 2019-20 snow season is implementing a B shift. Working within the parameters of the union contracts, we hired a couple of seasonal plow operators, and we used our spare driver that we have along with one of our mechanics to put 4 people onto a B shift so that we could try to extend our coverage in the St. Cloud district. And again, we only have the ability to do that within the St. Cloud district based on our union contracts. We did also have one person who was permanently on nights throughout the snow and ice season, and we're hoping to improve on that to continue improving on our overall snow and ice control response. That's all I have.
Okay, thanks. The next department is human
Just a
resources.
quick question for Jody. Jody, has COVID had any negative effect on the snow removal at all?
Not on snow removal yet, because it really kind of hit us after the season was for the most part done. Actually, it's probably better for us because then we don't have to worry about our maintenance crews working in close proximity to each other. So that's probably a more desirable work function to have in the area of COVID than some of our other highway maintenance tasks.
Okay. All right, the next department is human resources. Jennifer wasn't able to be here, so I'll take her measure here myself. This one is looking at applicant diversity. Again, this ties to our goals of wanting to be approachable and wanting to be fair and equitable. You can see we've got 3 years worth of tracking our applicant pools based on whether or not they were persons of color or they're disabled applicants. Those numbers for persons of color have been holding steady at about 13%. If you look at the demographics for Stearns County, 12% of our population is made up of persons of color, so that's reflecting the overall community. The number of disabled applicants we've been having has been increasing over the past couple of years from 4 to 6%. 2020 has been an interesting year with due to COVID and everything else going on. We have slowed recruitments down by about 40%. We are only currently hiring positions that are tied to law enforcement, public safety, or ones that are tied to grant dollars, like in human services, where we have needs to meet with clients. Otherwise, positions are really on a case-by-case basis to determine how long we can go before we need to fill a position. But the increase in applications by members by people who have been disabled has risen by about 3%. The persons of color has increased by about 2%. We have been working on impacting our diversity and inclusion recruitment efforts to show that Stearns County is an employer of choice for all members of our community. reaching out to job fairs through the different colleges in the area and working with other large employers, certainly working with Frigidaire as they were going through their closure to reach out and see if we could grab some of those employees and offer them employment in some of our openings. And I think that covers all of those notes. So I'm going to move forward again to Human Services and Melissa, who did an excellent job on coming up with her measures and making them very logical and quantitative. So thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, Steve. Melissa Huberty, the Human Services Administrator. All of the Human Services performance measures presented today, which there are 5 I'm going to go over, incorporate goals around integrated services across all of the divisions in Human Services with a focus on trying to move further towards prevention. The first is a Case Aid Connector goal, and these are positions that we repurposed about a year ago to focus in on those people we serve that are the most needy and who often require the use of numerous deep end services. So we're gathering data on the outcomes of these services, and if effective, we'll continue to focus our energies on this population of people because it's better for the human condition and of course saves taxpayer dollars. So we have a couple of grants highlighted in this section, both an opioid grant and a grant focused on helping teen parents that cap the amount of people we can actually work with. But we hope to prove the effectiveness of these prevention types of activities and serve clients in a better way and receive more funding to do services that we know make a difference to individuals and families. Next goal on the next slide is one that's children impacted by prenatal exposure and parental substance use. One of the biggest bills in any county government is out-of-home placement. So what we're doing is we're connecting public health nurses with folks that we know we're serving who are pregnant and have problems with substance use issues. We know that when we get there earlier, we can have clean babies when they're born. And then, of course, we don't need to do out-of-home placements later. So we're monitoring this and actually trying to do more proactive efforts earlier in the pregnancy. Next goal is civil commitments. This is a goal that we have done a lot of work to prevent people from going into state hospitals and also trying to work with people getting out of state hospitals. There's quite a bit in here that we don't have control over, but I measure it nonetheless. Because civil commitment is also probably the largest bill next to out-of-home placement in any county government. And it really can be a barometer of overall health in the community. So we monitor what's going on in here, even though we don't have complete control, because it's a good kind of barometer of how the overall health of the county is coming along. The next goal is our mental health performance goal. We've been to the board on a number of occasions to talk about our large collaborative efforts with human services, law enforcement, Central Minnesota Mental Health Center, Centricare, our co-responder model. And of course, what's happening is we see our high utilizers going down, which is a great thing because we're doing more prevention services. And we'll be back to the board if we get our grant that we were there recently to add some FTEs to work with people who are experiencing homelessness. So we'll be back soon with that. And the final goal is a targeted case management reimbursement rate. To get targeted case management reimbursements, it's a very complicated process. It not only matters how the social workers enter information into an extremely archaic system, but also about people receiving services maintaining their healthcare coverage. So we've been doing a lot of work with people to get on healthcare and stay on healthcare. And we've been quite focused on this to try to help the most vulnerable people in our community, and our rates are going up. So we've been successful, but we want to see that target rate keep going up to get the most reimbursement for the services we're actually providing.
Okay, thank you. Next, we move to our Property Services Department and Jeff Johnson and Jake.
Good morning. Good morning. This is Jeff Johnson. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I have 2 performance measures that I'll be addressing with you this morning. The first is with the land services area, particularly with the surveyors group. Platting is a statutory requirement, as we all know. We partner with other departments in the county, such as environmental services, land records management, recording services, and highway. In addition to that, we work collaboratively with private surveyors and local municipalities in reviewing the platting requirements. We also work closely with property landowners who are the customer in this process, and we use the private surveyor as the point of contact. Platting usually takes anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks. That's basically the time frame that we like to impose on ourselves to ensure that these plats move along rather quickly. However, we do encounter and have to resolve a variety of land title issues that go beyond plat checking. It's not uncommon for us to work with the recorder, the survey, and the environmental people to assist with the property owners with different legal aspects that deal with the platting. Typically, the statutes that come into play are 505, 515B, 508, and 160. These deal with all subdivisions, common interest communities, registered land surveys, and right-of-ways. And as you can see from the diagram that's being presented, back in 2017, there were about 101 plats and subdivisions that were processed, and 18, a total of 84. In 2019, 70. And at the time when this material was put together, we had as many as 47. Today, and that was back in May, today we're looking at about 64, and we're on track to do about 93 subdivisions today. Prior to 2017, which was the highest volume date, we were doing in the neighborhood of 60 to 80. We think it's really important that we communicate with all partners, and that's why it's important when we have a large volume of activity, keep everyone informed about the process. We continue to look at ways to improve on this process, and we're hopeful that maybe before too long we will have something, at least internally, in terms of a plat status tracker that will allow us to improve our communications both internally and then perhaps extend it outwards externally to our partners. The next slide, please, unless there's questions about the platting process. All right, we can move on to the next one. This deals with the quintile reassessment review standards. The assessors in Minnesota are required by law to value property or view property once every 5 years. In other words, 20% of the properties are subject to review, and that's to establish the market value of each parcel of real property listed for taxation. And at least 1/5 of those parcels listed should be appraised each year with reference to the assessment date of January 2nd. We've been tracking this for some time, and in 2016, the county average was 94.4%, and the statewide average was 89.5%. As you move to the present day, 2017, we increased that inspection quintile standard to 98.7, compared to 91.3 statewide. In 2018, 99.5. compared to 93.0%, and in 2019, 99.7 to 94.6%. As you can see, we've exceeded the state average. We're certainly well within the parameters and have met the quintile reassessment standard. A year ago, we viewed about 24% of the total parcel count, and in the prior 2 years, we were in that same realm of 24 to a little over 24, 26%. To date, we only had 87 parcels that still required inspection after the current assessment cycle of 2019 and 2020. So we take great pride in trying to get out and review properties on a regular basis. This year, COVID-19 pandemic presents some real challenges for us. We've had to adapt and implement what was called a desk review appraisal process, which we're using regional MLS resources, aerial photographs, and then most recently, Jake and his team have assembled and put out there a property verification survey. We informed property owners of this new practice by way of a postcard mailing, and as of last week, we had exceeded the 50 percentile response, which we think is quite good. We also intend to give it a boost, perhaps by doing a second mailing to those who have not responded to the survey, but also in early September, we plan on being on Chasm and speaking about the desk review process and how we want to increase our quintile inspection reviews in this manner. That pretty much concludes what I have to offer. Are there any questions regarding the quintile reassessment review process? All right, thank you.
Jeff, I have a question. This is Jeff Morgan. this has come up once or twice. Of the 20% of properties that you review, are the property owners required to allow the assessor inside their home?
Commissioner Mergen, that's a very good question. There is a statute that, encourages property owners to work with assessors. If they blatantly refuse to allow someone in the house and it's considered a refusal, it would not it would prevent them from having their appeal heard at the local board of appeal and equalization. There was a statute that was passed years ago that indicated that if the assessor was not provided access, then the assessor was required to notify the local board or the county board in the event that this property was to be appealed. Now, there are circumstances in which a property owner may feel uncomfortable. We can reschedule and do a review at a more appropriate time. Or if the property owner is uncomfortable, we don't try to impose ourselves and force ourselves into homes, but we will ask questions and do what's called an overview. Typically, we try to get into most homes once every 10 years. Every 5 years is the standard, but if there are ways to work around that, we will attempt to do that. But I hope that answers your questions. I know it's a real sensitive issue with property owners, particularly in this day and age with safety and now with COVID. We need to exercise caution, but also be respectful of the property owners and their wishes.
But what does the law say? Is it yes or no?
The law says that they can refuse us, and we'll ask questions about the house. But if they choose to appeal the assessment, then their assessment will not be acted on until the assessor is given access to the property.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we have the Sheriff's Office with, I see Sheriff Soika is in the room.
Yes, good morning. Well, I guess good afternoon, Commissioners. I present our Part 1 and Part 2 crimes as one of our performance measures. Minnesota divides all criminal acts basically into Part 1 or Part 2. Part 1, as you can see, is the more serious crimes, murders, rapes, robberies, and then the Part 2 crimes are the lesser ones, the forgeries, frauds, as it says there. The reason I'm actually presenting this is, as you can see, we didn't have a terrible year in 2017 where we jumped up that much in murders and rapes. What was happening back then was we were not reporting correctly through the RMS system that we were using. So if the management system that we were using at the time wasn't accurately getting the data input at the front end, then it wasn't reporting it to the state correctly at the back end. So we have switched since 2018 basically to a web-based records management system. That should alleviate the problem, and I'm hoping back in the end of 2020 here, more accurate numbers for you, basically 2018, 2019, and 2020 numbers.
Okay, thank you. The last department that we'll present is Veterans. Corey, are you in the room?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. Mr. Chair, Commissioner members, so as I think our data here is pretty self-explanatory in terms of the dollar amounts that are coming into the county. I think that these numbers are a little bit more nuanced than what they reflect, in that those numbers are a result of not just necessarily last year, and even the change isn't necessarily representative of the work we did just in that particular year. Those numbers are cumulative over the years of what have, benefits that are earned from veterans in previous years carried into the following year. What I do think is having both the population and these compensation dollars looked at, it is our office. We're probably the largest player in this area that assists veterans in Stearns County with accessing benefits. So as you see, our veteran population is decreasing, and we expect it to decrease. The majority of our veterans in Stearns County are over the age of 65. And yet our compensation dollars are increasing. And so I do think that the work of our office is a significant and probably the largest contributor to that.
Okay. Thank you. Before we open it up for any questions, I just want to let the board know that we will be posting all of the performance measures on the budget's website so that the public has a chance to look over performance measures that were related to today, as well as all the other performance measures that departments submitted. So they get a better ability to understand what departments do and the services that are involved. And with that, are there any questions from the board on anything that you've heard today?
The only point that I would make is that so many of the services that are offered are, the departments are really interrelated. And so as a result, it's challenging on one hand to isolate those services to just a specific department. But on the other hand, you got to start somewhere and show something. So it has, what you're trying to do, it has merit, but it also has limitations. So good job.
All right. If there's no other questions, I guess thank you for your time and
Thanks.
Thanks,
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
And members of the team, I'm trying to conclude our talk about the budget with sharing my screen, but I'm unable to do that. If someone can give me back the rights to the Williams presenter computer. Thank you. I just wanted to give you a glimpse of kind of where we're heading with the budget at this time. And as you know, you'll get detail about this at your next board meeting, but I wanted to be sure that you saw kind of where we were at this point. And you can see here that we have a budget that has slightly less expenditures in total, less revenues in total. And what that results in is an increase in the levy of 1.8%, which is about $1.5 million. Our tax capacity is increasing by nearly 5.5%. And so the resulting tax rate would be a drop of nearly 3.5%. That 1.8% increase in the levy is about actually a little less than the real growth. So actually the construction growth and what TIF dollars have converted back to regular taxable property. So you can see, and we've got a little bit of a trend developing, which is good, I think, to keep that tax rate, the rate dropping. And you'll see in the next reporting really the major drivers of some of these changes, but we wanted to make sure that we give you a glimpse of the overall budget. And if you have any comments about that or where you want to see us heading, we certainly are all ears at this point. Our departments did, as you can see, a good job with performance measures, but I would also compliment the department directors because they did a good job bringing in a budget here that is, we have very few increases other than a few things like our contracts, employee contracts are really probably the major driver in this budget, with a 2% increase coming in January and a 0.5% coming in July of 2021. But there's other major things in there that we'll share with you next week. But again, we wanted to have this process. We were striving to have a very minimal increase or even no increase in the levy. I'm happy to try to answer any questions.
Questions for Dr. Willie?
I guess I'll go ahead and throw something out. I know we're also running over, but this is important. Thank you, staff, for putting this together. But one of the things of note is not an increase in the human services budget, which is pretty tricky given all of the unfunded mandates we're expected to do, particularly about out-of-home placement and commitments, et cetera. A question I have, and this, I know that we'll know more once we see property tax payments in October. We'll know more if there is another state budget forecast. I know you were trying to keep this down. I mean, I think all of us would love it if we could figure out how to get it down further. A question I have, given if the feds don't come through with any help to state and local governments, given the deficit that Matt and others talked about on the state side, when do you see us looking at or what tools will you use to make a recommendation about dipping into reserves?
Well, that's a good question. And as we heard from Micah this morning, there's a lot of unknowns and with the state deficit, we don't really know what that will do to some of our revenues, as you said, Commissioner Clark. But this budget, as we have it today, has a very minor amount of use of fund balance. it's any fund balance we're using is out of what we call a project fund. So it's money that's really set aside for some capital expenditures. And I believe we had $500,000 in there. I see Randy and Steve nodding that we were using $500,000 of that. And so I think that, that could come into play for two reasons. One, if we're looking at some dramatic decline in state revenues, for example, or if we've got some director from the board to get this down lower, I could see us using some fund balance to do that. And then, of course, we'll probably want to be looking ahead to see what that could do to us in our 2022 budget as well. And I don't know, Randy, you have a comment about that too. But.
No, that makes sense. And I think I know that if, and Leah, this is where the geezer comment, I'm sure will come in, is that if the state has to, they're past at this point, it appears they're past shifts being able to be enough, et cetera, unless there's some recovery that we probably don't have reason to believe will happen fast enough. But generally speaking, it's not like cuts or unallotments have also come with an ability to say, okay, you don't have to provide these services anymore. So we will be required, likely, to still provide all of the required services, but with less money. So, I mean, a good thing is we do have some accounts we could be looking at, but at least from my standpoint, I know this is the high level. We don't want to go down from here, but do we even have enough information yet? Like, I guess I'm a little concerned. There's a part of me that wants to say, can we dip into them now? But if we do, and we're relying on that and the state cuts a lot, we may put ourselves in a more challenging situation, it seems, but perhaps you can say more about that.
Yeah, well, I think that it could even go the other way. I mean, if the Congress acts and we can take the CARES Act dollars and use them differently and,
Absolutely, I still hope they do that.
It could go a number of ways. So it is a little early, I think, in how much information we'll have by the time you need to adopt the final budget in early December. Hopefully we'll have enough that you're comfortable. As you all know, you'll need to adopt a preliminary levy in September. And then you don't need to adopt the final levy until, I can't remember our date. It might be late November or early December. So, and Randy, I think you were going to say something.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think, Terrell, you are correct that we do have some reserves we could look at if we get unallotted or if there's budget strains here. I think the budget we put together here with the 1.8% levy increase, as Mike was saying, that's our new construction and our decertification of TIF districts. So that's the growth of the tax base. I think it's a pretty, and I know, Jeff, you've mentioned this in the before, why don't we limit that levy growth to that? And that's what this budget does. It limits the levy growth to that new growth. So these are people that have just built a house and they're, of course, going to pay more taxes because they have that house. So I would agree at this point to use fund balance would not be wise, and to save that, that shot for later when we may need it. So,
And any other questions on this? We might find out a little later that later is already here, but relative to shortcomings, relative to budgets, you got fund balances from we've got reserves, and some of you haven't been around long enough to listen to my periodic complaint that our reserves are more than we really need. Well, now we're probably in a good spot. Second of all, if we have to borrow, interest rates are at record low, and if we have to borrow, we can. Now, we have lived through a situation where we had to cut spending in a very short term, like 60 days, and that was back, again, the Ventura Pawlenty administration crossover days of unallotment, where we had 60 days to come up with cuts. And the place we got the cuts, one of the few places we can act that quickly, is the highway budget. We had to cancel projects. So those are tools that are available. It's sort of like, going to the dentist. You wish you didn't have to do that, but you know that the only answer in the medium term is to go through some short-term pain. So we've had this experience before. There's enough gray hair left in the organization that remember all that. So there's your strategy in a nutshell. It isn't fun. It isn't perfect. It's what we got to work with.